so much for joining us today for this session titled Beyond the Birds and the Bees, Media Literacy in the Digital Age of Sexuality. So my name is Chloé. I work for the Media and Learning Association, and I will be your host and moderator for the day. So I'm really pleased to see you all. While people are still joining us slowly, I will quickly go over a couple of housekeeping rules. So first of all, this session is recorded, as you know. It will be made available afterwards on our YouTube channel for everyone to rewatch it. You are welcome to adjust your name in the Zoom, so you have 3 little dots, and please feel free to add your institution and your country. Also, if you are comfortable enough, we'd love to see your faces. It's always nicer to speak at people rather than blank black screens. Please keep yourself muted during the presentation to avoid any background noise. We will have plenty of time for interaction. If you have any question, you can always put the question in the chat or raise your hand as well using the little reaction emoji. But yeah, I'm sure the speakers will have time to answer them all. And yes, so that's about it. I'm glad to see you all. Before I will introduce our speakers and the agenda, I want to quickly talk about today's title, because indeed it's an uncommon expression for most of the, I would say maybe non-English speaking countries. So the birds and the bees, indeed, it's an expression often used by English speaking, and it's to talk about how children first learn about sex and relationship. And we thought it was kind of important to talk about it, as traditionally it happened at home and school, and now in our digital age, this will happen through social media, YouTube, and other digital platforms. So we see huge shifts, and it's quite important for media literacy, to tackle it. And also because media literacy, as we all know, is no longer only to talk only about and understand ads, news, but yeah, also to help young people make sense of messages they see online about sex, consent, relation, body images, and so on. So today we have the chance to have 2 different speakers, a woman-led session. The first one will be Emma Pösö, donc advisor at Save the Children Finland, and Vanessa Meyer, co-founder and CEO of the Knowbody App in Germany. After the presentation, each one of them will last about 20-25 minutes. We'll have an open discussion as usual, and everyone will be free to ask questions. So without further ado, I'll ask Emma to join us and start with her presentation.
Thank you, Chloe. Okay, so first up, let me just share my screen for you guys. Seeing if I am able to show it to you in the way that it's intended.
So at the moment, we do see your screen, but it's still the presenter mode, but I think it's slightly switching.
Okay, what about now? Hold on. I don't know, it just worked and now it's not working. Oh, here we go. Let me know if you are seeing something else.
Fun. Yes, perfect. We see your screen perfectly now. Thank you.
Awesome. Hopefully everything goes smoothly. If not, bear with me. But yeah, okay, so hi everyone, my name is Emma Pösö. I come from Save the Children Finland, where I work for our child protection in the Finnish hotline called Nettivike. I work as an advisor and analyst, so most of the time my work includes assessing illegal content, as well as then providing awareness to people around the world about child sexual abuse online. And today I will be discussing prevention of online child sexual abuse through the lens of sexual education. So online child sexual abuse stands among the most urgent challenges of our time. We know that, or according to estimates, 1 in 5 children in Europe were victims of some form of sexual abuse. And this estimate hasn't changed in the past 15 years. We also know from researchers from the University of Edinburgh that every second, 10 reports of suspected child sexual abuse are reported to internet hotlines, helplines, and law enforcement. And according to data from the largest CSAM hotlines, in every third child sexual abuse material or image or video, the child facing sexual abuse is under 10 years old. Offline and online child sexual abuse is threatening children of all ages and sexes worldwide, and only through different joint efforts can we aim to prevent it. For the Finnish nettivihiä, or the hotline that I work in, we have two central goals. The first is to promote the rapid removal of child sexual abuse material from the web, and the second is to prevent children and young people from becoming victims of sexual abuse. We do this from 4 different angles. So our hotline work and image analysis is at the center of all our activities. Through the hotline, we receive reports from the public about suspected child sexual abuse and child sexual abuse material. Our duty then is to accelerate the removal of the illegal material and pass on information to law enforcement to aid with their investigation. Our hotline, anyone can send in reports, but we also have specific reporting form for young people who can report if they themselves have faced grooming or any other form of online sexual violence. Now, what we see through the hotline guides the rest of our tasks. Our second central activity is awareness raising, such as preparing educational and informational materials, as well as offering different trainings and speeches to people of the public. Our goal is to raise awareness, especially in children and their parents, but also professionals who work with children. We know that we know that everyone, including children, parents, and professionals, they need to be aware of these topics to better prevent the issue. Additionally, one crucial way to prevent child sexual abuse is doing it through cultural and political advocacy. We aim to advocate for better EU and national legislation on child sexual abuse, and we do this work together with different child rights networks. Recently, we have advocated more on EU legislation and then also AI thematics. And last but not least is that all our work is not only inspired by children, it is done for them and with them through different forms of child participation. We like to think that children are the experts of childhood, and to keep them safe, it is crucial to ensure that they are being heard on matters that affect them. So especially when it comes to online environments, children know best what their own online spaces look like. And the more we learn from them, the better we can actually implement tools to support them in those environments. When I talk about child sexual abuse, what do I mean? Child sexual abuse is any sexual act between an adult and a minor, or between 2 minors, where one exerts power over the other. Child sexual abuse are all the acts that violate a child's sexual autonomy and integrity. And essentially, it is sexual activity without consent. It can happen both in offline and in online environments, and it can target any child, independent of their sex, sexuality, age, and gender. Online child sexual abuse is just as harmful as offline child sexual abuse. And there's also some proof to the argument that online child sexual abuse may even be more harmful than offline child sexual abuse, because more likely than not, out of online child sexual abuse material we have leftover material and then spreads on the online and then in the internet. When it comes to child sexual abuse, typically we see that it affects girls the most. However, it's not so black and white. And we also know that, for instance, children who are non-binary face more sexual violence than their female or male counterparts. So when we look at forms of online child sexual abuse, we put them in a few different categories. Perhaps the biggest category that we see, or the biggest form of abuse that we see on a daily basis, is grooming. So let me think about a way to explain it. Grooming is essentially a way to guide children into spaces online where they can be then, where child sexual abuse can then be put on them. Then we have sexual extortion, or also known as sextortion, where, for instance, a child is being threatened or blackmailed for money in order for their sexual image to not being spread. So we see this, for instance, that a child has thought that they have sent a sexual image to their peer or in a relationship, and then it turns out that the person they sent that image to isn't who they thought they were, and then that person starts blackmailing them for money in order for them to not spread the sexual image to the child's close people or family or friends. Unfortunately, we've seen a massive rise in the cases of sexual extortion in these past few years. Then we also have unconsensual sharing of nude images, as well as child sexual abuse material. And then, as a really new and upcoming trend, I suppose, is AI-generated material and AI-facilitated child sexual abuse. In these cases, we talk about imagery that has been created with generative AI or abuse that is facilitated by AI chatbots or other AI tools. And it's important to note that online child sexual abuse can happen in all digital environments. Any digital environment that is accessible for children can be a place where child sexual abuse happens. Well, sexual rights, sexuality, and sexual education. Building a child's self-esteem, teaching them to set boundaries, and helping them to understand their own body are central to effective prevention. We argue that without adequate and evidence-based sexual education, a child cannot develop a healthy relationship with their body and learn to value and respect it. Without it, a child will not know their own and others' sexual rights and freedoms, and they cannot identify if they have been victims of sexual abuse. In addition, without adequate and evidence-based sexual education, a child may learn harmful sexual behaviors and commit sexual offenses themselves. So adequate sexual education should be evidence-based and catered to the child's age. It should include teaching the child about sexual rights and diversity. It all starts with that. The child has the right to understand their own rights to sexuality. And the better a child is familiar with those things, the better they're able to act as agents in society. Secondly, sexual education should include introductions to values and rights related to sexuality and understanding certain attitudes about sexuality. Understanding what types of norms exist, but also norms that you should be able to break. The third section is in sexual education, we want to teach children about relationships and different types of families. This is a great time to teach children that not all families are the same, and that, for instance, my family may not look the same like someone else's family, but it doesn't make that family any less valuable. Then we want to, maybe one of the most central topics is teaching children about the human and the body human and body development. So teaching children about their bodies. Oops. I'm going too fast. There we go. So teaching children about their bodies and body parts and developmental stages like puberty. Every child has the right to know what language to use about their own body and how to describe their own body. And it's important that we provide children with adequate terms. So we're not only talking about, the birds and the bees, but we're also using words like vagina and penis, providing them with actual words to describe their body parts so they can also tell people if someone, for instance, inappropriately touches them in that body part. Adequate sexual education also includes teaching the child about feeling good and enjoyment, the positive aspects of sexuality that everyone has a right to. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, we hear that sexual education only focuses on the negative aspects of how you can get pregnant and how you can get diseased or ill or sick, but very rarely do we teach children that actually sexuality is something we can all learn to enjoy and that we can all do and that we can all sort of experience in our own way, in the way that we want to. And obviously, this conversation is something that needs to happen age appropriately with the child. So there's no need to tell a 5-year-old about all the positive aspects of sexuality. But, you know, when you start teaching a child about sexuality overall, and the older that they get, it's important to instill to them that sexuality is not forbidden, and that it's an integral part of every human being. In addition, adequate sexual education includes teaching children about emotional well-being, as well as sexual and reproductive health. And then last but not least, we want to teach them about safety skills, teaching them about how to set healthy boundaries, understand consent and differences between good touch and bad touch. When we teach children about these things, we can make sure that we can be more comfortable in knowing that they would be able to identify any harmful behavior towards them. So when we talk about evidence-based sexual education, the idea is that we give knowledge and skills and capabilities to children related to sexuality and sex ed. Eventually, we can see that it strengthens the emotional skills of the child. Like I said, we want to talk about our body parts by their proper names. Let's not create any shame and provide the child with words to talk about their own body and related concerns and questions. It's also important to note that a child, especially a small child, can pick up how adults talk about their own bodies. And if we create shame around our bodies when we talk to children, it is more likely that the child will also feel ashamed of their own body. So the more we can show children that we respect and love our bodies, the more likely they are to do the same as well. And like I mentioned earlier, it's good to start from the positive aspects of sexuality instead of the really negative ones. So let's start with that the child has the right to gain information on this, and that it's totally normal and good to have interest in one's own body and the body of another person. There's nothing abnormal of, for instance, finding someone attractive. And then reminding children that they have the right to their own body and their own boundaries. In addition, when we have these discussions with children, it signals to them that anything can be talked about. So when we talk about topics that are perceived as difficult, it allows the child to also come to you and ask questions about those topics. If we are not the first people to open those conversations with children, we cannot expect children to come to us when they have questions and concerns on that topic. And sometimes there are situations where we don't have answers for children, or we don't know how to tell them of certain things about sexual education or sexuality. And that's totally fine. We don't all need to be sex educators. Fortunately, we have so much amazing materials and so many amazing professionals around the world who are able to provide you with that information. So it's very much okay to ask and go seek that information before you talk to a child about these things. It's important for a child to know that they have been heard, their question has been heard, and that you will return back to them with some type of answer, but that answer doesn't need to happen then and there. And if the answer doesn't also necessarily need to come from you. So how does sexual education prevent sexual abuse? This is sort of putting like a timeline on how this works. So we like to think that when a child knows their own and others' boundaries and consent, they can better understand when someone crosses their own. So an example, if we've told a child that there are good touch and bad touch, that for instance, anyone can touch you on the shoulder, but not everyone can touch you on the breasts. A child will be able to identify that, okay, if someone touches you on the breasts, that means that it's bad touch and that shouldn't be happening. And that way a child can identify that something's gone wrong and they can go and tell a trusted, safe adult. So we want to provide them with the understanding of those things. And furthermore, we want to slowly teach them age appropriately about consent as well, that nobody can touch you unless you give them permission. The better we instill consent in children, the more likely they are to also follow it themselves. And it's important to note that children who don't get taught about boundaries and consent are more likely to break others' boundaries and not follow or not be consensual in their own activity. So not only are we helping children to better identify when violence or abuse is done to them, we're also teaching them how to not be abusive to others. Once again, knowing the names of body parts, this is, I think, my central message. Let's talk about body parts the way they're intended. So let's talk about penis, vagina, breasts, not flowers, not bees. These don't provide enough information as words. And one thing that I think a lot of the time is forgotten is that when we tell children, for instance, we start talking about the flower example is good. So in Finland, for instance, there's a way to go around sex ed by saying that nobody can touch your flower. And sure, we all probably can understand what that means. But if that's the only word that we provide a child with, imagine that situation when someone touches that child inappropriately and then they go back to the adult and say, someone touched my flower. How likely are we to understand what they are saying? Because obviously someone can touch a flower in the grass or outside or in the house. So I think it's important to give them that word so they can come and tell you with the correct word if something has happened. Teaching children about good secret and bad secret is also important when it comes to prevention of online child sexual abuse, especially. So basically, we want to teach children what things are things that you can always tell a trusted adult. Something that groomers typically use when grooming children is that they tell children that the conversations they're having are secret, that they're their own little secret and that nobody should ever know, that you can't tell about it to anyone. And because we cannot expect children to understand that this isn't true, because obviously it's coming from an adult and most likely an adult they think they can trust. So teaching children early on about what secrets are secrets that they don't need to keep. So for instance, if they are talking to a grown person online, that's not a secret you need to keep. That's a secret you want to tell. That's a safe secret to tell. And the more we teach children to do this, the more they can actively give us that information that we need to keep them safe. Then generally teaching children about safety skills online and offline is important. So for instance, giving children sort of green flags and red flags about grooming or inappropriate conversations online. Something that I've done with children is that with older children especially, is that I've given them a green flag and I've given them a red flag. And then I've read out certain statements and they're supposed to help themselves identify whether that statement raises alarm or whether that statement is okay. And then you can have statements like, a grown-up texted me online and asked me to meet them at their apartment. My goal is to make sure that every child knows to raise up a red card when saying that. So we want to teach children ways they can identify that abuse when it does take place. And this essentially is teaching them safety skills. And then maybe something that we don't word often enough is that the more we encourage children to be as they are, the more we show them that they are worthy and valuable, the better they are able to protect their worthy and valuable body. So children who grow up in unsafe environments where they haven't been told that they're valuable or their body is their own are more likely to have those boundaries being crossed. So we want to support them in building them, making them feel their own worth and making sure that they know that their body is their own and nobody can take that away from them. An adult's discomfort with discussing sexuality and sexual abuse should never stand in the way of a child's right to age-appropriate sexual education. What I can see your hands, love that. But essentially, these topics are difficult. Like, I'm not going to stand here and say that this is always going to be an easy conversation to have with a child. We recognize that that's difficult, but that difficulty should never prevent the child from accessing information that they have the right to. It's so important for them to have this information, and we want to make sure we're giving that information to them. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, the one thing you can do in that situation is make sure someone else can provide that information for them. So either some other trusted adult or another teacher or another parent. But the child has a right to this information. And now that we've sort of understood the importance about sexual education when it comes to prevention of online child sexual abuse, you might find yourself wondering, where do I start? How do I tackle this entire thing? Well, you are in luck because we have a massive amount of material that we produced a few years ago that dive right into these questions. So last year, we finished up a project called the CSAVE project, which is Child Sexual Abuse Prevention and Education. And the idea is to offer children, their parents, and their caregivers, as well as professionals, training packages and materials to use when teaching children about sexuality and sexual education. So the one on the left is a training package for professionals. So it has lesson plans. So you can they have different tasks for students, different ways to have these conversations, and different games about sexuality. The one in the middle that says listen and support is our guide for parents and guardians about children's sexual education. And this in particular has everything to do with the positive aspects of sexuality, how you can have these conversations at home. My personal favorite is the bingo, which is essentially a bingo game that comes with different body parts and that you're supposed to play body part bingo. And during the game, you can have those discussions with children about, okay, what is this body part and what does it do? And then you can continue teaching children about what body parts do and who can touch those body parts. And that was it for me. So let me figure out if I can stop sharing. 1 second.
Thank you, Emma. It was very interesting, also because it's a really new topic for me.
Okay.
So I'll ask you if you can put your video back on because I had to turn it off. Yes, thank you. We could not hear you properly, but hi again. So while everyone, you can put your question in the chat or raise your hand. In the meantime, I have plenty of questions actually. First of all, I wasn't sure about the title for this session, Beyond the Birds and the Bees, but actually now that you've mentioned it many times, I think it's quite appropriate. So indeed, not saying birds or bees, but the actual words. And talking about words, because now there is, I was wondering, how do you produce content online? How do you actually use those words? Because we know that a lot of the platforms are actually prohibiting the use of these words. So when it's in an harmful way, I understand, but when it's in an educational setting, let's say, I think it's exactly the same. They prohibit the words and they block you. So I was wondering, what's the situation for you? How do you do it?
Really great question and super on topic because that's definitely something that we struggle with. I produce a lot of videos for youth, especially in TikTok and in Instagram, and I definitely can see our account being shadow banned every once in a while because we use the correct words when discussing these topics. And something that we've tried to do is have enough people who work for TikTok and Instagram knowing what we do so they can possibly remove the ban if need be. But one thing that helps us is the fact that most people don't speak Finnish and TikTok doesn't speak Finnish. So a lot of the time they won't be able to identify the Finnish words that we use. But I know that other organizations like us, they have to use different words in order to provide them this information. And it's really unfortunate because, like I mentioned, it's so important about how we talk about these things.
Then you're going back to euphemism.
Exactly, yeah. And it's really no better than the birds and the bees at that point, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of complicated indeed because you have to be within social media in this platform to be on the battlefield and actually fight the fight that they are fighting. So anyway, but yeah, that was one of my questions, but I have a couple of others. First of all, I was wondering about the impact of AI in your work, because I think the threats have increased. You were talking about sexual extortion, but I was thinking about the deep nudes, all of that. That's now, I mean, kids are bombarded with it. So yeah, I was just wondering about the impact. What has changed in the past years?
So much has changed, even in the past 6 months, right? Like the tech area is changing so rapidly, and it's almost becoming impossible to keep up with it. And unfortunately, we run into these issues already after children have become subject to them. But I think when it comes to AI, the biggest increase that we've seen in my line of work is that we've seen more material being produced by generative AI. So basically, we know that certain AI models can use already existing images of children and make those images into child sexual abuse material.
Yeah.
And they are not necessarily real images, or they don't depict real situations, but because they are based on images of real children, it is just as harmful for the child. So this is definitely one alleyway. But then we also know that AI chatbots are being used for grooming purposes. So, for instance, a perpetrator might create an AI chatbot that makes it so that they send out 100 messages a minute to 100 different children, and then they try to scavenger out what child picks up, and then they can start the grooming process.
Yeah, because we see that happening with adults as well, for example, and the different dating apps and all of that, that there is chat box going on and doing also that kind of thing. And so then are you, because you were saying that you are in discussion with authorities and legislators, so are you trying to incorporate that into new laws, for example, implementation?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so that's definitely something that we're doing very much right now, especially on the EU level. Currently, a lot of new legislation is being formed on these topics when it comes to the prevention of child sexual abuse online. There's a few regulations that are being proposed that we are essentially lobbying for. So we're just trying to make them as secure as possible for children. And I think when it comes to authorities and legislation, what's important to understand is that not only one agent can't do everything. So it's important that we activate parents in their protection. It's important we activate children to become more aware of the issue, but it's important that we have laws and legislations that also make it mandatory for certain tech companies to do their job also in preventing child sexual abuse in their own online environments.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then we also work on this information, and it's quite important for us to have the platform being accountable. So I think it's the case here as well. And the last question, you talked about child participation, and I was wondering how, in what formats are you interacting with the kids and the children? How do they participate? Do we have workshop? Like, how does it work?
A little bit of everything, I would say. It sort of depends on what's going on in the project at the moment, but maybe most recently, something that I do on a weekly basis is that I have conversations online with children. So because I am responsible of our TikTok environment right now. So I go and comment on children's pictures, and I have conversations in the comments with children about their experiences, and I try to sort of actively take in their feedback through that. But then in addition to do sort of very sort of focused child participation work, we have workshops. And then we have sort of roundtable conversations. So we bring children in to have discussions on these topics. I think our most recent example would be we found 4 youth who wanted to participate in a conversation about safety online, and we ended up producing a small article piece about that to publish in our local newspaper.
Okay, that's kind of nice, yeah. And do you do anything with parents and teachers?
So we have a lot of parents evenings, essentially, is that we hold webinars. They've been really popular. We've had over 1,000 parents at one time.
Oh, wow.
So they've been really successful, and that's maybe the best way for us right now to reach parents. But then also just making sure we're active on social media and that sort of thing is another kind of part.
Okay. We had one question from Bella, but I think it's maybe best if you try to answer in the chat. I think she was talking about conspiracy theories around sexuality. So, I mean, I think regarding that, you can maybe just answer in Finland what's going on and how to fight those conspiracy systematically. So, yeah, if you can maybe, answer in the chat.
The comment section. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And so we'll move on to Vanessa Meyer, then a co-founder and CEO of the Knowbody App from Germany.
Thank you very much. I'll go ahead with the screen sharing as well. And thank you, Emma, first of all. Great presentation and talk. Great setup for what to do now is go into action. I mean, basically everything that you just presented is at the core of why we started doing what we are doing. And to get over this threshold of this unspeakableness of these topics that I experienced firsthand myself while growing up and while getting sexually educated very poorly from my German school system, even though I know in comparison, like we do have quite a few privileges at place with it being mandatory in schools and so on, but still we saw some need for improvement. And when I talk about we, I'm gonna just quickly introduce who is normally working with me. That is Caroline, my co-founder that I had the idea with together to develop a sex education app with the big struggle of not being able to program anything other than, I don't know, a tiny robot in school. So therefore we found Fabian as well. He is our programmer and he developed the app and does everything that has to do with technical stuff. And we are sort of a startup of sorts based in Germany, in Bochum, which is in this sweet spot of many big German cities in the west. So it's close to Cologne. It's probably the city that most people know for its carnival season, among other things. And we are sort of right in between Essen and Dortmund. There's Bochum. And it's an old steel, very industrialized city that is now sort of finding its new ways after all the industrialization. And yeah, as I already started to tell you about how did we get here, it was basically me and Caro sitting at university at a Mensa table and discussing things like the clitoris and us realizing with being 26 years old that we have one because nobody told us before, because it is not part of any biology book, and it's still not like not even pictured there, and not named correctly either. And so after sort of getting into the rabbit hole, after discovering this, we discovered many more things that nobody told us about ever before, and decided that it would be so great if we could provide sex education for everyone in schools that breaks this status quo and makes it more inclusive and respectful of everyone, regardless of their gender or sexual orientation. And this is the too long didn't read part that we then thought, let's just build an app. But yeah, before we just did this on a hunch of our own frustration, we then, of course, started to ask the people currently in school to make sure that they have the same problems that we had. And found out that after 353 students surveyed between the years of 2020 and 2022, that 72% of them said that they never talked about sexuality in media in class, which is the topic of today, but also many other topics are never talked about in school, which is, as we've heard from Emma, also concerning sexual violence, which is mostly not spoken about. There's 63% never talked about sexual orientation or identity. Almost 60% never talked about gender roles, and over 56% never talked about abortion. Mind you, all of these topics are, according to the German ministries, have to be are topics of sex education in school when you look at the curriculum of German schools, at least, and many other countries as well. The reason behind this comes down in big parts also because teachers are never prepared for these topics to teach them in school. Mostly in Germany, it comes down to biology teachers who sort of have to step up and step in when talking about pregnancies. But as we've learned, or as Emma has pointed out already so perfectly, that sex education is not just about bodies and pregnancy. It's a much wider field, and you need the whole societal part in there as well in order for children to actually develop a self-determined identity, to sort of conquer all that's been thrown at them topic-wise. And therefore, even though most of the teachers do feel responsible for sort of speaking about these topics then themselves, it of course is very difficult if you've never even gotten the training for it. And also if the contents that are available for you at school are, as we've already said as well, lacking in actuality mostly, but then also in diversity. And on the internet, as we all know, and as everyone knows, whoever Googled sex or whoever opened up TikTok pretending to be a 13-year-old, it's gonna be a mixed batch. I'm not gonna say that everything's bad on the internet, because I personally spend about an hour a day on TikTok myself. But my algorithm looks very different from a 13-year-old child. And there are very good content creators who do great work on social media, but the clue and the crux of everything is that children have to figure out how to sort of figure out the good ones from the bad ones, and therefore need help in doing so. So we asked ourselves, how do we change this status quo? And except from watching sex education on Netflix, as you can see in the GIF, we then also decided to develop a sex education app to be used in schools. So this is Knowbody that I would quickly go over. If interest, we can also look into some of the units later, or maybe I'll just do a quick switch, because generally, like, this is the web app that you can see now, I think. Yes, perfect.
Yes, perfectly.
So generally the app, as we are a German developing team, we started in Germany. It's used in German schools mostly, but we have translated some of the units. So you can download it, and there's a free test version and a demo version that you can look at. I recommend you going to the menu and to Einstellungen, and then we can switch to English. We also have some units in French, but for now I'll show you the units in English, which are at the moment 4 out of 11 in total that we have, but 4 are translated in English. And each unit sort of represents one hour in a classroom. And the goal is that basically teachers and students would each have the app on a device, either a smartphone or a tablet that they can work with, and would then do the class with the help of the app, meaning that not that the whole 60 minutes is spent in front of the device, but the whole app is mostly constructed around the think, pair, share method. So we have different tasks that are numbered, and you should more or less follow the numbers, but you can also skip some. That you would then sort of click through, and most of the tasks sort of at some point throw you into a group, either group discussion or a pairing, a tandem task, and then sort of share what the students have learned during the task at the end in a plenary discussion. So with what is sex, we would, for example, start with a GIF gallery, asking the students to select those that they think could be associated with the word sex, and then sort of have a group discussion about which feelings are being displayed, which might be missing, what might these feelings have to do with sex, and which show boundaries. And that opens up the space actually quite nicely for the students, who are of course quite excited once they hear that today's lesson is about what is sex. Then all panic breaks loose. And then after doing this task, they sort of realize that any feeling associated with this topic is okay today. They don't have to share which GIFs they clicked, but you have nice discussions in the classroom already about what are boundaries, like what is joy, what is discussed, like any of these feelings can already be talked about, and it brings a nice calmness to the class, with whom you can then sort of go in deeper into the topics. And then following tasks, which in this case would be a mind map, sort of sampling first times that you can have. And in this case, with suggestions of body parts that we sort of give, from penis, vulva, vagina, hand, mouth, feelings, not a body part per se, that's the exception, and the anus, to sort of get them to a wide view of what body parts can be involved in first times, and to figure out the question, is there this first time? Because in German we often say das erste Mal. It sounds like there's only one, and usually students have quite a strict and narrow definition of what the first time is, and we try to break this off with this mind map. and then go more into sort of the ground rules for any kind of sexual contact, which is the most important one is, of course, consent. That is sort of here the last task of this unit. So just so you have an idea of how the app works, these are the units, and this is then accompanied by a handbook for the teachers that gives them sort of a guideline through the units on how to present them in class, how to moderate them, and an overview of which unit is suitable for which sort of class grade and in which subjects you can easily fit them in. And yeah, so now just to quickly tell you why an app. I mean, as I've said, the internet is the main source already for students to get their knowledge from. And oftentimes we see that after sort of a session in school, they get brochures to take home, which they usually never look at. And so the app was one hope was that it would be more of an incentive to actually continue to sort of browse through the app after school, because usually in school they would never get through all of the 11 learning units, and therefore whatever interests them at home, they still have it with them on their phones or their tablet and could just continue to browse in a sort of safe environment. Using tech is always giving you much more space to actually making diversity visible. A book can only print one picture on a page, whereas we can randomize 10 different bodies and show you a different body each time you open the app and the body scanner task that includes all of these bodies. We can randomly display them, and we can just make it diversity more visible, which we think is a big up. And of course, it's also easier to keep an app up to date than to reprint a book every 2 years, because there is so much more information about the clitoris and other body parts coming up every year that we can easily update and or also rule out any mistakes that we might have made. And we don't have to print a whole book set anew. And yeah, and then especially the advantages of a shared learning experiences, which shared learning experience. There's a stumble. That we try to facilitate with the app is, as I've already showed you, the think, pair, share method that we mostly use. So it is very important for us that students don't only just learn about sexuality at home or on TikTok, because that's usually by themselves with maybe interactions in the comments and so with other people, but it's very anonymous. And it makes it very difficult for a lot of people to, in the actual situation of being even in a very positive surrounding, like a loving relationship, still people struggle to sort of speak out their needs and or name a body part, as we've heard before. So our main goal is to make students to give them the words, to make them able to talk about these topics, and to try to get this practice in the classroom in a way that is still respectful of their personal boundaries, because the school classroom, of course, is not a learning space for all the topics. Like, you don't want to discuss your favorite sex position with your teacher of biology who grades you next week on, I don't know, photosynthesis. Like, that's just not the case, and that's very okay. And for this, online learning spaces like TikTok are great. But when the app, we just try to provide as many references as possible, so you never really have to share a personal experience. So as we have in the mind map of the first times, there's then many different first times that are being sampled that don't have to do anything with your own experience, but still you learn to talk about it and to like use the word anus for the first time, which still is a big taboo. Making it, even for me, oftentimes difficult to bring this as an example, because I'm like, oh God, how can we talk about this? But then again, of course, for people who are not hetero, it's a very, or just for everybody, actually, it can be a very normal part of sexuality, and therefore, why should we not talk about it? It just brings up boundaries that are also to the disadvantage of a lot of people. And yeah, so therefore we try to give them at all times some kind of examples that they can reference in order to speak about these topics in the classroom with other peers in a boundary respecting way. And of course, also use diverse media formats to sort of try to have something in there for everyone. Some people like listening more to stuff. Some people like reading texts more. Some people have disabilities with that we can cover by having the text also in an audio format as well. Even though the app at the moment is not very inclusive in that way, we do want to make a version of the app in easy language as well to make it more accessible. But yeah, it's a work in progress, but that is definitely something that we still have to work on. And of course, we promote media literacy, not just by the use of the app generally, but we also have these topics in the app talking about body images online, for example, and the general representation of sexuality and bodies in the media, and making them critically think about what they see online. All right, and overall, we found that the app actually acts as kind of a refuge or sort of a barrier that is quite nice actually for the situation in the classroom, so people can sort of, as we do with Think Per Share, usually start to enter the topic on their device, sort of type in their own, not their own experiences, but type in what they want to concerning the topic, and then sort of start putting down the tablet and sharing with others and going into discussion. But it is quite nice that sort of each has their own device and sort of has always this refuge in the app to sort of take a step back if they want to. But of course, there's also many limitations to this. First of all, digital media never replaces advice. So there's still the need for in-personal conversations with professionals who can give you advice if you are in need of it. And we try to make that aware to teachers, that they are informed about what kind of offerings they can make to their students in the region. Content is only as current as its creators. We might think we're super cool and on the point with language, especially of the youth. And I can spend as many hours on TikTok as I want. I will never understand how it looks and feels like for a 13-year-old. It doesn't have to. Like, I don't think that we have to nail Gen Z language in the app in order to be relevant. But still, we already see that, like, for example, the voice messages that we have included in the feelings, getting to know your feelings unit, they were, I think, recorded 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we got great feedback for them from students as well. Now it starts to shift. So it is just you have to currently always update your content in order to speak to current experiences of youth. And of course, we need the teachers who facilitate, in our case, the contents most of the times, and are really sort of making or breaking especially sort of the atmosphere in the classroom. So if the teacher is saying something very discriminatory, for example, against Muslim students, which we have a lot of the times, or perceiving them as to be not so interested because they're not allowed to, which oftentimes comes from the teachers more than from the students, then we can put in all the anti-discriminating contents into the app that we want. It won't have the same effect. And therefore, we try to speak to teachers and teacher students as much as possible as well, and make sure that diversity inclusive approach is being taken. Yeah, and anyone who wants to take a look at the app can do so, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Close call on time, sorry.
Yeah. No, but it's perfect, and we still have a bit of time. Yeah, I see that Angela actually put a couple of questions in the chat. So before answering those, actually I have a few things. First of all, I was wondering about the piloting of the app. So in how did it work, in how many schools, and also the age group? Because for example, in the case of Emma, I would think that you qualify children from until up to 18 maybe, or sexual majority depending on the country. But so Vanessa, I was wondering which type of schools are involved. Yeah,
Yeah, so in
and the
Germany, the
grades.
pilot phase we had in 2022 for about a year. And we generally say the app is for 12, from the age of 12 onwards.
Mm-hmm.
In schools, it's usually in Germany, it starts in the 6th grade and
Yeah.
then goes up to the 10th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And the higher grades are usually don't ever have any more sex education, even though they usually want to know some
Yeah.
more. So I think some of the units you can easily also do with an 11th or 12th grade class.
Yeah.
Some others might then not be as relevant anymore. But yeah, anything from 6th grade onwards is fine. School throughout different school types, like for there we don't really make a difference, which has its ups and downs, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, with some restrictions on schools with special needs children.
Yeah. Okay. And I was wondering, how is it received? How is it, yeah, received by the schools and by the teachers? Did you have any bad reaction or rejection from some? How do you approach the schools and the teachers you are working with?
It depends. Like now, it's mostly actually teachers who find us because
Yeah.
during the pilot phase, we build up quite a nice network that sort of now goes like mouth to mouth. In pilot phase, we started a lot by contacting teachers on Facebook groups, which are now, I think, mostly non-existent
Yeah.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But that worked well back then. And we, of course, try to be present in as many sort of events that are related to teachers and teaching as possible. And we have one cooperation with one federal state in Germany who sort of got the app for the whole state. That's Bremen.
Okay.
It's a small city state, so it's the smallest in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
But they have also the technical setup for it because they have a one-to-one device to student
Yes. Okay.
technical
Yeah.
thing going. And so every device now just has access to the app as well.
Okay. And last question, is there any homework? I was wondering because you said that the whole point is that so there's lesson, they go through it with teachers, but then the app goes home, and like this, they can also go through each one of the units on their own. So I was wondering if there is little exercise they can do at home, homework, things like this.
We started with that notion to
Yeah.
have little homework brackets and then also a profile where you can see like what you still have to do. And then in the pilot phase, we found that no school does homework anymore.
Yeah, okay.
So we just stepped aside from that idea. But it is, of course, always possible to, when we develop new stuff, to sort of put this
Yeah.
into there as well. But generally, maybe also to speak shortly on the data part of it all, everything that you put into the app is only stored on your own device.
Mm-hmm.
So teachers and students, they don't see what each
Anything.
other does in the app, which sometimes teachers request, and we all kindly decline every time
Mm-hmm.
because we don't think that they should see anything that the students put into the app or where they are or what they have looked at already. It's just none of their business. And it works well in the classroom, even without knowing what they're actually doing at the moment, or if they answered the question correctly, or if they're taking part. Because if they don't want to, then they don't want to. But
Yeah, I think this data privacy part is actually also important to convince or to work with teachers for them to know that it's safe to use in the classroom with their student, and there is no data issues as well. So coming from Angela, there is a first question. She's asking if any, for example, country, ministries, organization, institution is interesting to implement this app and translate it in their own language. What would be the steps, for example? So
well, I guess, yeah, firstly contacting us.
Yeah.
I have the email ready. Great.
Yeah.
I'll
So
contact you.
yeah, just contact Angela. And then I think she also asked how many users you currently have at the moment, and if you could quickly explain what it works with the subscription. Is it monthly, yearly, depending on the school size or the class? Yeah.
At the moment we have, at the moment we have class and school licenses for school. And for both it's a yearly thing. For schools we charge at the moment 250 euros per year for one school with around 200 users, which usually is enough to cover a school, as we've seen just from previous engagements. Because it's usually only in 1 or 2 grades that schools do have these topics in the classroom. And then there's also like a single user subscription that we only did because very cute grandparents asked us if they can use the app as well. And but that you can buy directly through the App Store, but it's not really its intended use. So we don't really push that in any way. And at the moment, I think, well, we're a startup and not super good with numbers and only 2 people, but once Fabian actually put some technical thing in and we could at least count how many times a license code has been used, have 13,000 people who
That's a good number.
A license code.
Okay.
At the moment. But that's only like how many logged in, so we don't know how often they were, or we probably could know how often they were in, but the only information that we get from users is when they put in the license code and when we check if it's still valid or not, and that is it. That's all the data we have.
Okay. So thank you, Vanessa. We'll quickly move on to our open discussion with Emma. I just wanted to do some promotion actually for Vanessa and her colleague in the Knowbody app, is that we have the Media annual awards competition this year, and the Knowbody app was actually shortlisted as finalists. So 1 or 2 weeks before the ceremony awards, we will have an online voting with short trailers from all of our finalists, and you will get to vote for which one is your favorite. So now that you had a presentation from Vanessa on the app, I'll send you all the links and you'll be able to vote as well. So yeah, thank you, Vanessa and Emma. So if anyone has any question, we'll have 10 minutes discussion before the end of this session. So please feel free to put it in the chats. In the meantime, I have also a couple of more general questions on the topic. So I think some of them were already answered by both of you. But I think I have got one. What practical tools, strategy, or curricula have you found the most effective in helping young people develop healthy digital habits and boundaries related to sexuality and online behavior? Because it's something that we do a lot in media literacy, disinformation, fake news, and all of that, is that what works the most with which targets, and in that case children, what would be the most effective you've seen talking about sexuality, or maybe some type of harmful behavior? I don't know, for example, Emma, grooming or sexual extortion, what works the most?
Yeah, I can answer with a few things. So on my side, I don't straight educate children on sex ed. That's not sort of my expertise. I sort of teach professionals on how they can teach it. So I don't know what tools have been best based on practice, but some things that I have recommended, not only the ones that I already put into that mentioned CSAPE, those are definitely very kind of hands-on tools to use that kind of, you really don't have to think too much yourself when you use them. You can just sort of do what the materials tell you to. But then I also added to the chat, one of the last link I added was towards a web page where I've titled How to Discuss Sexual Abuse with a Young Person, Videos and Instructions for a Professional. And the idea of this web page, and I think it's 6 videos, is that you can show these videos to children, and then there are some questions and answers on those videos that you can sort of discuss with the child after watching them. So they sort of get that conversation from 2 sides. So they can take information from the video that's been produced in a very child-friendly way, but then also it includes guidance on what type of conversations to have with that video. So I know that professionals have found that one at least very helpful as well. And then I think anything that sort of gamifies sex ed in the first place is good. I think it goes with the app as well, right? Is
Yeah,
that it's
indeed.
interesting as is that it's sort of something that children know how to work amongst. They understand how they work. They're sort of interested in doing it themselves. So anything, whether it was an app or then a bingo card or any type of other thing, I think is really useful when it comes to making sure that children digest the information that we give them.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Vanessa?
No, I think, yeah, Emma covered it quite broadly, and I think most important is always just to make the children sort of self-determined enough to sort of be able to just, yeah, feel empowered to know and how to use and how to react to these situations.
And also, I think if I would mention one more thing is that sort of knowing when to have those conversations, right? So for instance, if you are a parent and you want to have this conversation, sometimes the best scenario isn't to, you know, sit them down around the living room table and have like this really maybe complex conversation. It's not the most comfortable situation for probably anyone in that scenario. But then there are times when, for instance, during just like daily lives, when a child, for instance, asks something about periods, or they ask something about something they heard from school, or they tell you something that has something to do with sexuality and sexual education. Those are great situations to pick and be like, hey, this is a good time for me to naturally incorporate sex education into this conversation. So just sort of being, the more we sort of take part in our children's daily lives, the better we're able to sort of accidentally throw some sex ed in the middle of the conversations that we have with them.
Yeah. And just to kind of refocus on digital media, I had another question, and I think this one was kind of tackled by Vanessa a bit. It's how can sexual education efforts be made more inclusive and culturally sensitive, especially in online environments that often amplify harmful stereotypes or marginalize certain identities. For example, in gamification, we know it, also the gaming culture, there's a lot of stereotype going on. So yeah, that's an important question.
Yeah, I mean, especially also in with AI now, with all the, if you like, I don't know, generate a picture of a woman, and then you get like, I don't know, over-sexualized visual representations of a body that is unattainable for anybody. So therefore, I think the disadvantages are huge, but I think especially in the regards to diversity and inclusive approaches, online spaces give you so much more room to show them off. And as creators are usually a lot more diverse than any kind of publishing house deciding on what to put in a book. So I think that there we really have the advantage of the online world, where you can specifically also target and give students information on maybe a specific group they belong to. So if we have, for example, Muslim students in the classroom and they are unsure of whether or not it's haram for them to talk about this or not, then you can look for a creator who talks about this, who is Muslim themselves, because you are not, and it doesn't help pretending to be, and it doesn't help pretending to say, I know how to interpret the Quran more than I know how to interpret the Bible, because you probably can't do either. But there are people online who can speak to those experiences, and you can include them in the classroom, and therefore make people more seen and be represented in a way that they would never have been before. Same with sexualities. Usually you have a hetero cis teacher in front of you who has never experienced or knows nothing about the queer community, and that's okay to some regard. I mean, you should be informed, but you can't speak to personal experiences, and you shouldn't have to be, but you can include voices from communities online who can speak to those experiences and make young people feel more seen and feel more connected, and also give them spaces online to then find support and find answers to the questions that they have from people that can actually answer them.
Emma, do you have anything to add?
I think what Vanessa said was really, really good. I think maybe to sort of add to that is that one way to sort of tackle the issue from afar is to sort of start in breaking those harmful norms and attitudes. I think a lot of the time, certain sort of ideas of sexuality, and especially sexuality as it pertains to children, they're upkept by the idea that children are unsexual, or that sex has nothing to do with children, and that it's somehow unnatural for children to be sexual beings. And then I think when you add to that a marginalized individual, it becomes even more taboo for some reason. So I think the idea of that we need to sort of actively break the taboos when it comes to these issues, so we can also actively incorporate real evidence-based information in the way we speak about these situations. So I definitely think it's sort of not only actively incorporating diverse children and people in our imagery and in our materials, but also making sure that the conversations that we are in, we are not adding to the negative stereotypes or the harmful norms that have been created around these topics.
Yeah, and this sense also very important to not make it the abnormal. Like we follow a sex education sort of path from a how is it called? Forscherin, a scientific person who puts out
Yeah.
studies, whatever the word is for that. She formulated a diversity inclusive sex ed evidence-based, and says that it's very important that you don't, like, we have a unit about relationship norms and all kinds of relationships are in there, and we don't have a unit about relationships and then a unit about homosexuality to make it sort of this, oh, and then there's this other thing that you can do, which is like stupid. But oftentimes in books it's done exactly that way. Like you have the main pages, and then as a sub page you have that, and then there's sexuality, and then there's trans,
like
and then there's inter. And like when we talk about genitalia as well, we don't label them with a gender, because you can easily talk about the penis without saying that it has to be on a man's body. Like students, they understand it all perfectly, and most of the times people don't even realize that we just don't include these adjectives, but it works perfectly, and it opens up the space so much more to also include genitalia that is neither penis nor clitoris, and that sort of makes you very aware of the parts where biology and medicine just fail to describe human beings, because they have a whole section of body parts they can't put, or they have never put into categories, making the categories a bit questionable themselves. But like, and you don't have to have these complicated conversations in the content with 13-year-old students, because that is something for gender studies to discuss in the future. But you can make it more inclusive from the get-go with just trying to sort of leave your biases behind and just sort of make a more neutral space for people to actually form their opinions and find their identity in a way that is not sort of pre-categorized for them.
We have one more question, and then we'll be concluding the session from Paula. She's saying that teachers are often faced with questions from students in an informal conversation. Your work is very important. Earlier, we also had someone else saying congratulations, so it's positive. And she's asking, are there more women than men teachers using your resources? I'm not sure if you have stats or figures, but...
We personally don't have stats on that, but I would suggest it is this way in Germany, but just because there's generally more women educators than there are men
teachers
educators. Yes.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. We don't have actual stats of who use, but we know that there are more women educators in Finland, and I think there are also more women, like more professionals working with children are women than men. So I think it's definitely more likely that more women are using these.
Yeah. And to the first part of the question, I'd say it's that is exactly why we really want to get sex education out of biology, because every teacher is going to be faced with these kind of questions sooner or later. Say, let it be on the playing ground and in between classes. Like every teacher has to be aware also of especially sexual abuse situations and be able to step in. So that therefore it very much underlines the importance of making this all teachers.
I think when it comes to having sort of informal conversations, I think those are the best conversations to have with students, because they are not so loaded a lot of the time, and that they're most likely, this child is very comfortable in that situation. And I think that's the best place to pass that information on to a child. So I think also encouraging those sort of informal conversation is one thing as well, is to, create more spaces where children can have these conversations with adults.
So thank you both. We will be concluding our session of today. Thank you all for joining. So thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, Emma. It was a really interesting, at least from my side, session. I learned a lot. We have just a couple of announcements to make before concluding. The first one, I think my colleague will be putting, So yeah, the first one is just about the association and the work we are doing. So if you are an organization and you would like to become a member, please do so. You can find all of the information online on our website. So at the moment, we have over 105 organizations from 27 different countries. We're involved in different projects. We do a lot of online events, as you all know, and a lot more, like special interest groups, the media awards that I've mentioned, and conferences. And then next, unfortunately, today I cannot present you our agenda for autumn 25, but it will be very soon announced, potentially in June. So just subscribe to our newsletter to stay tuned for the upcoming events. So thank you all very much. Thank you, my colleague Dovile, for our support. And yeah, have a good afternoon. Thank you.